Hi everyone. Today I will be discussing the cross-battery assessment. The purpose of this paper is to describe how the psychoeducational evaluation cross-battery assessment is used to determine a learner's eligibility for special education services. In order to do that, we must examine certain features of the cross-battery assessment. The features we will inspect technical adequacy, bias, purpose, the need for this type of battery, and fluid reasoning. The information in this paper will provide the necessary details an examiner would need to determine if this assessment will provide the required information. The first aspect we will scrutinize is the technical adequacy, bias, and purpose of this assessment. Next, we will look at the reason this type of assessment is necessary. And then the last aspect to be discussed is fluid reasoning and how it relates to cross-battery assessment. Technical adequacy, bias, and purpose of the assessment. The technical adequacy of an assessment is its reliability and validity. Cross-battery assessments provide good technical adequacy because it has better construct representation on intelligence and cognitive ability tests. Cross-battery assessments also provide results that remove ability and construct underrepresentation. This means that the individual assessments alone have too few subtests that measure narrow abilities, and cross-battery assessments rectify that issue. Cross-battery assessments possess adequate construct representation because the examiner can decide which subtest to use to meet the specific results needed. When choosing assessment subtests for a cross-battery assessment, be sure to only select from assessments that are valid and reliable as well as free of biases. Biases for cross-battery assessments were not discussed in the required video, but the examiner is expected to utilize subtests from individual assessments that have been determined to not possess any bias for any race, gender, religion, culture, socioeconomic status, etc. There have been revisions and updates to the individual assessments to ensure that there are no biases. The educational diagnostician, licensed school psychologists, and other related professionals are trained to determine which assessment will provide the data required to make the best determination for the student's education. A component of deciding which assessment to use is the task of ensuring there are no biases in the chosen assessment. In addition to an assessment being bias-free, its purpose must correspond with what needs to be measured. Cross-battery assessments serve an important purpose. They help practitioners identify learning disabilities in students while helping them to determine the best way to educate students who meet the criteria for special education services. These assessments allow practitioners to measure reliably a wider and/or more in-depth range of cognitive, academic, and neuropsychological constructs than that represented by any given standalone assessment battery. Cross-battery assessments are a time-efficient way to assess cognitive and academic abilities as well as neuropsychological processes for students who are suspected of having a learning disability. When assessing a student for a suspected learning disability, there may not be one standalone assessment able to provide the in-depth information necessary to properly diagnose a specific learning disability. If that is the case, then a cross-battery assessment is needed. Need for the cross-battery assessment. The need for cross-battery assessments coincides with the need to delve deeper into the psyche of the student to determine the best and most efficient way to serve them. A WIS detective strives to use ingenuity, clinical sense, a thorough grounding in psychological theory and research, and a willingness to administer supplementary cognitive tests to reveal the dynamics of a child's skill score profile. The Woodcock-Johnson revised WJR, was the go-to assessment because it measured 8 fluid crystallized cognitive abilities, while the other cognitive assessments only measured from 3 to 5 cognitive abilities. Even though the WJR measured more abilities than the other assessments, there were still a lot of abilities that weren't measured. There wasn't enough information in the results of individual standalone assessments to be able to come to an accurate, reasonable deduction about the student's ability. That's the reason why cross-boundary assessments were researched and used. Cross-boundary assessments allow the examiner to pick and choose subtests from various cognitive academic ability assessments to test in depth the student's broad and narrow abilities. This provides a deeper understanding of the student's needs, which furnishes a better opportunity to answer student referral concerns. The cross-boundary assessment provides a deeper, more in-depth assessment because it assesses the student's fluid reasoning. Fluid reasoning. Fluid reasoning, or GF, refers to the type of thinking that an individual may use when faced with relatively new tasks that cannot be performed automatically. Basically, this means a student's ability to think through tasks and come up with an original way to solve a problem. Fluid reasoning is a broad ability comprised of 3 narrow abilities, which are induction, general sequential reasoning, and quantitative reasoning. The narrow ability induction measures a student's ability to observe a situation and identify underlying rules of why it behaves that way. RG measures logical reasoning, and RQ measures mathematical reasoning skills, both induction and deduction, that include numbers and/or measurements. The broad ability GF includes skills such as identifying relationships, making inferences, organization, and identifying related concepts. Once GF has been assessed and deficits have been identified, the examiner can then determine what tasks the student will have difficulties with in the classroom. Once the difficult tasks are known, there are recommendations made to the teacher to reduce the effect of the specific manifestations that may appear due to the GF deficit. In conclusion, the cross-boundary assessment is used to determine a learner's eligibility for special education services by measuring more in-depth and distinct abilities. Cross-boundary assessments make it possible to choose a specific subtest from various qualified evaluation assessments that will yield the desired results. These types of assessments are advantageous because they are time efficient, can measure specific abilities, and can be tailored to meet the individual needs. Student skills such as reasoning, generalizing, observing, perceiving, and critical thinking can all be measured effectively with cross-boundary assessments. The information gleaned from the assessment results provides an in-depth, comprehensive look at deficits in the broad and narrow abilities, as well as the specific skills affected by the deficiency. Results from cross-boundary assessments provide the examiner with the necessary information to make specific recommendations to the teachers, parents, and staff for the betterment of the student. Thank you for listening.